You have a big project. How are you going to get it all done? Whether this is a big project for you, for a special event that you're trying to go to, or maybe this is your business and this is a huge project and you want to make sure that you get it done on time so that you don't miss your deadline. Where do you start? I'm here to help. I'm going to share how I schedule my big projects and help you with project time management. Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Trisha, your pattern nerd friend. I love all things pattern making and have made my living by making patterns and making costumes for over 20 years. This is something that I do all the time, is manage big projects. We often have overhire stitchers and such and so forth, but I also do big projects for myself. And this was something that came to my attention. I mentioned it in a story on Instagram and I got a lot of feedback that you wanted help with this. So I thought I would share my process. Now go ahead and hit that subscribe button so you can hear all my tips and tricks that I have learned over the years in my career. Turn on those notifications so you know exactly when a video drops. Please share this with your friends if you think that it might help them in their sewing journey. Before we dive in, the number one thing that I find the most helpful is I am a planner. I know, creative people, we're not always the best planner. And it doesn't mean that if we put it in a schedule that it has to be done exactly at that time. I'm not that kind of a planner. Planning puts me at ease. If I have an idea of when things are supposed to be done, I will know if I'm behind in schedule or not. And if things have to shift around, I know kind of what can shift around and what can't shift around. What that means is I have planners and I have calendars, and not just this one. I have many calendars. You want to see? We have this calendar and we have this whiteboard with project and we have this calendar. And that's just to name a few. I've got several. The bottom line is it's really easy, and especially for me, and I have a clue that it might help you as well because you're here watching this channel and love sewing content, obviously, that you might be a visual person. And that's why I like calendars. It's like I need to visually see and count how many days I have. That is the first thing. Grab yourself a calendar and start to plan. Like I said, I know plans can be scary. Maybe you don't like being told what to do. But what it does is it gives you a guideline to follow. And of course, you're the one making the plans. You can always change them. So this is gonna be more of a chatting discussion. So I'm gonna sit down for this. Pull up a drink. Let's get into it. All right, so the first thing you need to know is, what is your due date? Do you have any wiggle room? Is it for sure this is the day of the event, this is the day that things need to be done? That is what you really need to start with. So what is your due date, and how is your finished garment, finished costume going to get there? Are you shipping it? How fast do you need to ship it? How far does it have to go? That means that really your due date needs to be that many days beforehand to make sure it gets there on that specific date. If you're wearing it to an event, obviously you don't have to ship it. You're going to be wearing it. So you have until that day at whatever time the event is before you need to start getting ready. Those are important things to keep in mind as you start your planning journey. The next thing you want to think about is, how are you going to make this thing? And estimate your time on how long each part will take. Now, when I'm doing a big project, if there are many parts and pieces, you break down each individual part and piece and think about, okay, this is going to take me 4, 6, 8, 10 hours to sew. Once I've figured out the pattern, once I've done the mock-up, and I have all the materials in. So that's that one part. Then if there's 4 or 5 parts, you want to do that and break it down for each part. Take notes, before you start plugging things into your calendar. If it's one project, if it's one dress, maybe think about the different elements. I find it easier to break things down. If I've got a unitard and a headpiece and some gauntlets and a collar and some spats, breaking it down for each individual. Okay, the headpiece, maybe it'll take 8 to 10 hours. The unitard, maybe we're talking more like 10 to 12 hours to make, depending on how complicated the fabrics are that I'm using. Maybe the gauntlets, 2 hours. You know, just think about the sewing time by itself, and then think about how long is it going to take you to figure it out. Now, in my world, we do a lot of multiples. Often, but not always. So doing things in multiples is great. So if you're doing like a dance company and you have to make 12 of the same thing, even though there might be different sizes in there, that's a matter of grading the sizes after you figured out the first one, but you're not figuring it out 12, you're not figuring out 12 different things. You're figuring it out once, you're figuring out your sizing once, and then you can cut them all at the same time. You can sew them all at the same time. So you can kind of save time there. But when you're thinking about breaking everything down, how long is the sewing time? And then going into those other elements, how long is it going to take to pattern? If you're using a store-bought pattern, are you sure you have all the sizing? Are you gonna have to do a fitting? Usually I recommend and always do a mock-up so that I can do it really quick and make sure it looks exactly how I want it to look. So that is all time. And it can be overwhelming, but if you break it down into each piece and just think, okay, it's gonna take this many hours to do this, and that R&D time only has to happen once. So if you're making multiples, you're like, yes, I have to do a pattern and I have to grade the sizes and I have to do a mock-up and I have to do a fitting, but all of that just has to be done once. And then you want to also think about cutting time, because all of that needs to be cut out, and then there will be sewing time. It's really important to kind of break down each step of the project and figure out how long it's going to take for each step of that project. So then you can really start to break down, how long is this going to take me to complete the full thing? And this is how I break it down when I'm doing a big project. Next, you want to think about ordering materials. If it's materials that you can go and get in town, yay for you. Some of us live in the middle of nowhere and we have very limited resources. So a lot of what I have to get for projects, I have to order. How long is it going to take me to order? How long is it going to take me to research? You know, do I have to order swatches and then make a decision, or have my designer look at the swatches that I've ordered and make a decision and then order it again? If I'm going to do expedited shipping, that might eat into my budget if you have a budget that you're working with. We're gonna focus more on the timeline, not so much budgeting for this conversation, but if you would like more information on budgeting, please drop a comment and I'm happy to do another video about that at another time. Thinking about how long it's going to take you to get certain things, and the rarer things, like the harder things to get, then I would order those first. And then knowing how long it's gonna take to get those things, so knowing that you can't start on that element of the project until that thing arrives. So if it's embellishing and finishing, it takes forever to get, then we know that that's gonna likely happen towards the end of your sewing time. But if it's something that you need for the mock-up, or you need to test the stretch of the fabric, or if you need to do anything like that that needs to be sewn on first, then you wanna make sure that that arrives before that step needs to be done. And if it's really eating into your time, then you want to look at what other things can be done that while you're waiting for that material to arrive. So kind of noting how long it's gonna take your materials, like maybe making a list of all the materials that you're gonna need, where it's coming from, how quickly you can get it. Then I start planning. So kind of taking notes on all of that stuff. Then I go to my calendar and I put in my due date. I put in my buffer date, like do I need to ship by? If this is when it needs to be there, when do I need to ship by? I give myself a little bit of buffer time, because you always want to have time. Time. Oh no, it didn't turn out how we wanted. We need to have time to like fix it. Also, like quality control, fine-tuning things. If it's something that you are embellishing, having time for, adding that designing time, adding that extra little bit. Plus, I just give yourself a buffer so that you're not down to the second in case something happens, in case something doesn't arrive in time, in case your fitting gets pushed back. Due date, and then giving yourself a little buffer, and then going to your project. And in the midst of all of these notes, like you're gonna figure out how many hours it's going to take to do this whole thing. From the day that you're starting this plan to when you need to have it complete, is that feasible for you to do all by yourself? If it's a big project like this, I can tell you that's never the case. So I need to look at where can I save time instead of hand cutting something. Can I use a Cricut, or can I get it cut in some other way? Instead of fusible with my iron, can I get it block fused? Things like that where you can save some time, or instead of hand making bias, can I order out and have bias made? So that's something to think about. The other thing to think about is labor. Now, of course, if you're making something for your own event, or maybe can you enlist some sewing friend help? I'm thinking about it from a business standpoint. So when you're getting to that point where you know how long everything might take to get done, and you're realizing you can't do it all by yourself, and you can't figure out how you can really cut corners anymore, it's time to enlist help. How much help can you get? Maybe you need to reach out to friends and see if they have friends. How much available time did they have that they can fit in your project? When I'm thinking about subcontracting and sending stuff out to certain stitchers, I try to group things together. If I have 5 of the same thing, 10 of the same thing, I want to give all of that to one person if possible, or give 5 to one person, 4 to another person, whatever they can take on, because they're going to get faster as they do those things. Another thing that I do, again, not talking about budgets in this way, but I will figure out how long it takes, or my team will figure out how long it takes to make something. And then we agree on a set price per piece, so that if the person I'm hiring takes a little longer or actually does it faster, I know how much I'm spending to have the labor and the help on that particular item. Again, you can do this if you're working on your own clothes as well, like enlist some sewing friends and just ask if somebody can help you with the hand embroidery, or somebody has an embroidery machine or whatever. Like, what parts can you kind of map out? Or maybe you can do it all. You need to think backwards from your due date. What needs to be done before the last thing can get done? Obviously, your pattern and your fitting need to happen towards the beginning. The embellishing happens towards the end. Your cutting has to happen before you can sew. Maybe you are flatlining, interfacing, fusing. That needs to happen before you start sewing. If you're adding trim or boning or anything like that. I will also recommend, I think everybody who sews and is starting out, especially on time management, thinking about projects, when you are estimating your times, whatever your first thought is, if you're like, oh, I can make that in 6 hours, allow 12 hours. Because that happened every single time. I was like, I could do it in 4 hours. It took me 8 hours. Oh, I could do it in 6 hours. It took me 12 hours. Always double your time. And if you do it faster, yay, you've got extra time. Same with your materials. If you think it's going to take 2 yards, order 4 yards. Coming from a project where I kept running out of fabric, I had to order 2 different fabrics 3 separate times because we kept running out. It's something that, it's better to have too much than not enough. If it's really expensive, like really fine tune how much yardage you need and give yourself at least a couple extra yards to play it safe. Those are my top tips. Let me know if you have any questions. Did you find this helpful? Another thing is I have created a project checklist. So this is a checklist. I basically do it on my own every time this way, but I started off by just making a list. I do this with sewing order. I do this with projects. Like, this is what needs to be made. We need to do the pattern. We need to do the mock-up, fitting, pattern adjustments, ordering materials, cutting it out of the real thing, sewing it together. I love crossing things off of the list. It goes with my planning nature. If that would be helpful to you, we'll give it to you absolutely for free. This is a freebie that I give out to my newsletter. My pattern news list gets a freebie every month, just because you are in my world. So this was one that went out recently. You can sign up in the link below to join the pattern news list. And if you're seeing this later, you've already missed that, but just email me and say, hey, can I get that project checklist? And I will send it right over to you absolutely free. And if you are curious and want to learn more about pattern making, we also have the free pattern masterclass, which you can try out my teaching style for free and learn more about pattern making to make that beginning part a little simpler and more fun. I hope you found this helpful. Thanks again for watching. I'll see you next time.